the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across this great globe of ours, all 25 time zones, whatever it is, prolifically covered by this program, Ghost to Ghost AM. Good morning. I'm Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie on this evening, this ghostly evening. And we're going to do something a little different this year. We're going to do unscreened ghost-to-ghost calls. Now, there will be certain rules, and I hope you will try and abide by them. Rule number 1 is only one ghost story per caller. I repeat, one ghost story per caller. Number 2. Please try and use anything but a cell phone. I like cell phones. I've got one. They're useful in cases of emergency, but they're terrible for talk radio. Now, if you have a ghost story that is just so good that we all have to hear it, and you can only use a cell phone, well, then, so be it. But it better be awfully good to suffer over the indignities of a cell phone connection. And, of course, please, only the very scariest stories. And I mean the scariest stories. I'll give you an example here in a moment. As a matter of fact, actually, I'll kind of pepper examples throughout the program. These were sent to me in the last several days, and I picked a few choice ones, and I'll sort of drop them in. But once again, this is an annual event. We only get to do it one day during the year. That is to say, when we have nothing but ghost stories. Now, I would prefer they be first-person ghost stories if possible. In other words, not something that your mom was told by your grandma and so forth and so on. So if it's a first-person ghost story, it's better. If it's not on a cell phone, it's great. Remembering only one story per customer. And, oh, by the way, we took a Bell family Halloween photo. It's up on the website, right in the upper middle. If you go to coasttocoastam.com, you'll see it. We had fun doing that. The three of us. By the way, for those who are inquiring, all cats are fine. All our cats are just fine. Yeti, Abby, and our import Dolly, doing very, very well indeed. So a picture of the three of us, myself, Aaron, and, of course, Asia. That's on the website. And then if you click on the a webcam, there's a picture of just Asia there that I took the other day. I think it's really, really cute. But once again, this is Ghost to Ghost, folks. So let me run over it one last time. One story per caller. One ghost story, your very best effort. If you can do it on a landline instead of a cell phone, well, bless you. Remembering you've got to let it, we're not going to use screeners. So that means let it ring and ring and ring and ring. And that way you'll not be charged for any on-hold time or anything of that sort. We'll pick it up when we're ready to talk to you. And only the very scariest stories. I think this program has established over decades now, that there is indeed some sort of consciousness, some sort of continuation after death. Now, the nature of that continuation, we have not established. But with EVPs, with other proof, we've established pretty well, I think, that indeed there is some continuation following physical death. Ghosts would be certainly one mainline piece of proof of that continuation. So if you have a good ghost story, here we are. Now, if you're west of the Rockies, the number to call is 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. Remember, I will answer the phone, so it is up to you to have your radio turned all the way down right away as soon as you hear me answer. First-time callers, area code 818. 818-501-4721. Area code 818-501-4721. Wildcard lines, we've got several of those. Pretty good chance to get through at area code 818-501-4109. 818-501-4109. Outside the country, the international line, call up your operator, have her connect you no matter where you are in the world to our toll-free international line, which is 1-800-893-0903. 1-800-893-0903. In a moment, Ghost to Ghost AM. Let's begin with something Kathy sent in from Springfield, Illinois. Art, let me preface this by saying my grandfather and I had always been very close. I know he would never have let any harm come to me in any way. My grandfather passed away in February of 1978. He had a heart attack in the bathroom of his home at about 3 in the morning. My grandmother was home alone. We took turns staying with her after the funeral. About 3 weeks later, I was reading on the bed in the spare bedroom. Something caused me to look up. Coming out of the wall was what looked like my grandfather. He was transparent. You could see right through him, but he still had form. Words can never express how horrible he looked. He looked like he had dug his own way out of the grave. He had on a pinstripe suit, the one he was buried in. He had what appeared to be Spanish moss dripping from him. I live in Springfield, Illinois. Believe me, we don't have Spanish moss around here. I began to scream and get off the bed to run when he suddenly disappeared. Now, I didn't tell anybody because I was afraid people think I was crazy. This would be the end of the story, but 20 years ago, I found out my son had seen the same identical apparition. As close as we can estimate it, it was about 3 months later, and in the front bedroom of our house, other family members have seen dark forms standing over the bathroom sink doors and lights that turn on and off, and all this for no apparent reason. We're now 58 and 40, respectively, and we'll never forget the sight. Was it a ghost? A demon? I'll never know. But I know we saw it. I believe. And, of course, that's what happens after you see for yourself. You believe. Let's go to the first-time caller line and say good morning. You have arrived at Ghost to Ghost as number 1.
Hi, Art. How are you doing?
Very well indeed, thank you.
I am so glad to talk to you. I racked my brain for a ghost story, and I couldn't think of it. What I really want to ask you...
Oh, no, this is ghost stories only, dear. If you don't have a ghost story, you shouldn't be calling.
I know, but I wanted to ask your AOL.com so I could get a picture of you and your family.
All right. Well, there's a picture of our family on the website right now, and that would be coasttocoastam.com. Now, you see, the very first call was a violation of the rules. Ghost stories only. Ghost stories only. Now, I'm trusting in you tonight because this is all unscreened. I'm just putting you on the air. Now, if something is said that shouldn't go on the air, I can certainly eliminate it, but this is unscreened. That means it's the honor system. So ghost stories only. West of the Rockies, you are on the air. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Raul. I'm
Yes, sir.
from Tacoma, Washington.
All right.
I'm going to just tell you a real quick story. Probably I'd say it's about 20 years ago, I was living with this friend of mine in this duplex, and just out of the blue, all of a sudden, I started getting all these scratches on my like soft parts of my body, like underneath my legs where my calves are.
Big wide scratches or like cat scratches or?
It looked like there was at least always 4 like rakes. It looked like I was getting raked on my back by my friends would joke and laugh. Hey, what did your girlfriend? Making jokes that. And I was saying, hey, I don't know what I'm getting here, And then My dad's being in the medical field. He says, "Well, it's probably just some, psoriasis or something like that." And I was thinking, "Well, I don't, And then I caught what kind of made me think more about it. I saw like this show with like Spock on it. It was kind of like that's what was the only thing back in the 80s, that was like about paranormal stuff.
Were these like human scratches? I mean, like nails, human nails, or what?
Yeah, it was like nail scratches, just like, and then they would almost pop up almost to the point where it would almost blood would but then they would go away. Just
did you ever feel it when it happened?
Just very, very, very vaguely. Very, very vaguely.
Was this occurring when you were asleep, or
it could just occur at any time? We could just be sitting there at that time, in the early '80s. We were sitting there watching some MTV or something, just sitting around hanging out, and all of a sudden I'd just say, "Hey, look, guys!" and I'd pull down my shirt, and then right behind my neck is these rake marks, and then it caught my, like I say, that show, was that narrator, and they showed this same similar incident to this guy that was just in like Boston, and
So how did it resolve? Did it just go away, or what?
Finally, when we moved from that duplex, it just went away. And then finally, as years went on, people would say, "Yeah, you were a victim of a stigmata," and I didn't even know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about all this stuff, and so I started listening to your show. And then I started hearing more about it, and I think, one of these days I'm going to call Art. I'm going to do it. Sure enough, I get in the first call.
This was the second call. This was your night then. Scratches. Wonder what that could be. Not to say for sure that it's a ghost, but human scratches on the body just suddenly appearing, barely felt when they occur, but then turning up as big welts. East of the Rockies, good morning. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi there. You're on a cell phone, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
So that means your story has to be extra good.
It is very good.
All right, go ahead.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're right on the air, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is why I believe in ghosts. For 10 years, I was stationed at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Yes, sir.
I was a security policeman, and we did maintenance. We did security for all the missiles that were in the missile field. Mm-hmm. There were thousands of people that have been through this Air Force base, and all of them, I bet, can repeat this story. All right, the story goes, one day, a missile maintenance crew was out in the field. While they were working on the missile, a set of arms clamped a man. If you can imagine sticking up your finger in the air and grabbing it with a pair of pliers, that's what these arms are like. Because...
Wait a minute. Why would everybody know about this story?
Because when I finish, you're going to understand. This is a very famous story.
Okay.
But I've never heard it repeated. So, this missile is held in place by these large clamps because it can take a direct hit from a nuclear missile. So these things are very, very solid.
Right.
So while he was working on the missile, for some reason, this clamp activated and pinched the man almost in half.
Oh my God.
So very quickly, they made a call back to the base, and as quickly as possible by helicopter, they flew out a medical crew. The man wasn't doing very well. His blood pressure was beginning to drop. So they asked him, "Is there anything that we can do for you? Because it doesn't look like that you're going to make it." Mm-hmm. The man said, "Yes, I would like to be able to tell my wife one more time that I love her." So they arranged to make a radio call to his wife, and he was able to speak to her one last time. After the phone call was finished, they said, "All right, we're going to release this arm from you." The doctor told him, "I don't think I'm going to be able to stop the bleeding. Mm-hmm. And this may be the end." So he said he was ready. They released the arm, and as the doctor said, the man died on the spot.
Right.
The place where he died was missile silo, Kilo 11. All right. As I said, these missile silos can take a direct hit from a nuclear missile. They have a 10-ton concrete door on top of the missile.
All right.
On the outside of the missile, there's nothing but a fence. They don't worry about people getting inside, so all you need is a fence. But there are alarms. There are alarms on top of the ground and below the ground. After this incident happened, almost every night, the alarm underneath the 10-ton door inside the missile, where it was impossible for anyone to go, would go off almost every single night.
Good Lord.
And the men would have to respond
Sure.
and go out there and check outside the fence all around, and then they would have to open the hole and go down where the missile was.
So he was still there.
So they say.
Yeah. I really appreciate the story. Thank you. I've heard similar stories. There was I think it was Law and Order, very famous Law and Order series in which a man, in a similar fashion, was squeezed by a subway train. And they actually got the train stopped, and it hit him about midline, in other words, right across the stomach. And as long as that subway was in place, much as the man just talked about the arms around the missile, the blood flow or the blood pressure in the upper part of the body stayed roughly, kept him alive. But the very moment, of course, they moved the train or changed anything, blood pressure immediately dropped and the man passed away. So what that man just had to say about Kilo 11 was entirely possible. What followed, with that alarm going off on a nightly basis, is, well, it's why we're here talking about ghosts. Many times, spirits appear, and this is a part of life after death that I would love to have solved, because I think it kind of makes us all a little nervous. It sometimes appears as though a spirit, or an echo of a spirit, if you will, remains continually setting off alarms, or, people getting a glimpse of the same thing again and again and again, like a terrible tape loop, like something that wasn't finished. Wildcard Line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Art. How are you? And it's a pleasure to talk to you.
It's good to have you, too, but you're also on a cell phone.
Yeah, I hope the distortion's not too bad for you. It will clear up.
Not too good at the moment, but go ahead and give it a try.
Okay, my name's Herbert. I'm a truck driver.
Yes, sir.
When I was in the military, stationed in Mayport, Florida. Lived on base housing, and we had a baby goat. The wife started hearing it at different times. It would cry, and when I started hearing it, I'm sure you're familiar with footy pajamas.
With what kind of pajamas?
We call them footy pajamas. It's got the feet.
Oh, sure. Okay, I know.
Just up the middle.
Yeah.
And I had two small boys, and sometimes at night I would hear the footy pajamas come in there to my room, and right there at my headboard, I think it was one of my sons, and I'd reach out, and neither one of them be there, and I'd get up, go check on them, and they'd be sound asleep. So it was kind of funny at times. It never scared us. And then one night I heard the footy pajamas come into bed, and all my hair is staying on here right now. And I felt the foot of the bed go down. So I knew it was one of my sons climbing in bed with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I raised up, and the moonlight was coming through the window, and there wasn't nothing there whatsoever. And I couldn't scream. I couldn't holler. I was just terrified. And my wife, she was a real light sleeper. Anytime you touch her, she wakes up to see what's up or what I needed.
Sure.
I started shaking her on. I almost tossed her out of bed. And just out of the blue, something come over me. I don't know what willed it over me, but I lost all motion, all feeling. I wasn't scared. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't nothing. And something without the feeling of touch just made me lay back down. As soon as I hit my pillow, I was out.
Were you paralyzed?
No, I mean, at one point when the feeling came over me, I didn't have no emotion. It's hard to describe. It was almost like a void. I had no feelings whatsoever.
Okay, so this was not sleep paralysis of any kind.
Oh, no, I was wide awake because I was wide awake running some things in my head because I was going up for advancement exam the next day.
Yes.
And I was wide awake, and I was running over these figures in my head so I could do good on my advancement test the next day. So I wasn't even asleep when this happened, but I...
Got it. All right. Well, listen, we're coming up on a break here. So I appreciate your call, and we'll continue with ghost stories. I've got a number that have been sent in to me, and I'll kind of pepper the program with those. But otherwise, we're depending on all of you non-cell phone people to call in. Ghost to Ghost AM, actually. Unscreened calls. We're just picking them up as we get them tonight. But we do have some rules. One story per caller. Please, folks, don't use cell phones. The last caller was an example of why I'm making that request. For a story to be good, you got to be able to understand it, right? And please, only, if you will, the very scariest of stories. In fact, if it didn't scare you, it probably won't scare us. Those are the numbers. Love to hear from you, and we will continue in a moment. Dear Art, this is not going to be the scariest story on tonight, but I guarantee every word of it is true. I'm a retired police officer. I've never had a supernatural encounter, seen a UFO, but the following story is the closest I've come to a truly strange experience. Around 1990, at nighttime, a robber held up a small Asian bar, which was tucked into a mostly industrial area of the city. A solo patrol officer happened quickly upon the scene, confronted the robber, who was walking on foot in a nearby alley. The robber turned, smiled, and quickly crouched and reached for his gun in his waistband. In a classic one-on-one Western-style shootout, the type seen on TV but really actually experienced by most police officers, the solo patrolman kept his cool, killed the robber on the spot. I was working that night, was on scene along with several other officers within minutes of the shooting. I eventually left to handle other calls, but a short while thereafter I was dispatched to the hospital that a robber's body was taken to do a follow-up report and secure evidence. I was in the hospital room where the robber is lying dead, shirtless upon a bed. His arms lay flat upon the bed, palms up alongside his legs. There was a hospital attendant in the room with me. I had 2 plastic bags with which I was going to bag the dead suspect's hands for later GSR tests, stands for gunshot residue, to help determine that he had, in fact, fired a weapon. Well, as I opened the first bag and leaned over him to bag his right hand, the dead man's arm lifted straight up in the air in a perfect 90-degree angle with his elbows still on the bed and his right hand now pointed toward the ceiling. The attendant and I both gasped and stared at each other, and the attendant said something that you can't say on Coast to Coast. Well, that's it, Art. I won't embellish anything. Nothing further happened. Of course, it was a dead man's spasm, right? But it was the only dead man spasm I ever saw, and the timing of it in that I was literally about to reach for the same hand was truly eerie. Even for a police officer, I figured he was either trying to cooperate in the end or else he was going for one last desperate grab for his gun. And he goes on to give me the names of those involved in the city, and I won't relate that. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, is this Coast to Coast?
Yes, it is. Ghost to Ghost.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I've got a cat ghost story.
All right.
About a cat that passed away.
Yes, sir.
And basically said goodbye with the motion sensor light of the porch, on the porch when I was
outside.
Oh,
yes. Uh-huh.
And it was crazy because it freaked me out in the beginning that the motion sensor was going off and there was no one around. But
well, sometimes insects can set them off,
Oh, no, this wasn't set that sensitive. Like it
Okay.
had to be a person walking by or a car. But I think this was a way of the cat saying goodbye, and I'm okay because it had been hit by a car the day before.
Oh, I'm sorry. It could be. Various things appear to us, and I'm not sure if our brain makes the connection because it wants to make the connection because we want to be able to say goodbye. We want to be able to say, I love you, or one last thing. And so sometimes our brain makes that connection. Sometimes perhaps there's a little more to it. Make that west of the Rockies. You're on the line. Eric, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Candy, and I'm calling from Sacramento.
Yes, Candy.
Well, my story is a pretty scary one. I haven't told many people this throughout my lifetime. I'm 36 now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the weather was hot, so it must have been around June or August in the summer months from school. And I was in the 6th grade. And the family was on vacation and at home. I didn't go with them wherever they went to. I can't remember that now. But Grandpa stayed with me, and he was in the living room, and I was coloring at the dining room table.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one of these old organs in my room. And down the hallway, I could hear this music coming from the organ, and I knew I didn't leave it on. And it didn't play by itself.
Right.
And it was beautiful yet eerie. And I kept coloring, and I thought, well, it's going to end anytime soon, but it kept going. And I kept more curious about it. So when I went down the hallway, there was this chill in the air. And Grandpa had told me a couple of months previously that if I were to experience anything scary, just to call on the name of Jesus,
mm-hmm.
and everything would be all right. And I was getting scareder by the moment I kept walking up the hallway to my room. And I called on the name of Jesus, but it didn't go away.
Did you get into the room?
I got so close to the doorway that the music was blasting my ears. And what happened was I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to go back and get Grandpa because I thought I could handle this by myself.
And
then
I can hear you. I can actually hear the fear in your voice as you're telling this.
I've been listening since 1998 to you and George Norrie, and this is the first time that I've ever been able to get onto the radio to tell my experience.
Okay, so what finally happened? Did it just stop or what?
No, when I turned into the doorway real fast, there was this thing that I can't describe to anybody, but I could have drawn pictures of it to.
Okay, we'll try. You're going to have to give it a try. This thing,
yes,
non-human thing. I guess if it was human, you wouldn't say thing, would you?
No, it was unearthly. I have no formal description of how to put into words what it looked like, but it was red. And it was glowing.
Oh.
And it must have been a demon that I saw.
Did it have a form, a body, arms, legs, that kind of thing, or any appendages at all?
Yes, and it was using its hand-like fingers on my organ player.
Yikes.
And it looked straight at me with yellow eyes.
Yellow eyes.
And
red with yellow eyes.
Yeah, it was the most unbelievable, undescribable being. And I'm shaking right now, but
I can hear it.
It challenged me at the age of 6 years old. So I said, in the name of Jesus Christ, be gone, I command you. And it lifted its head up like it had never been told this before. and just vanished.
Whew. All right. Well, that's some story. That's some story, and those are some words from a 6-year-old. I really appreciate your call.
Well, thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you for making it, and take care. Yellow eyes, huh? Listen, I've got a picture up on the website you might want to see. I'm pretty picky when it comes to so-called ghost photographs. I don't latch on to just any, but this was sent to me by Robert. It arrived about a week and a half ago or so. It's obviously taken in an ICU room in a hospital in Colorado. And it was just a nurse testing a new camera, testing the flash in a new camera. Nobody else in the room, and yet if you look in the mirror, you will clearly see somebody dressed in what appears to be perhaps a uniform, sort of half there and half gone. It looks like an old uniform to me. Looks like whoever this is has been around for some time. And this has to be one of the best ghost photographs I think I've ever seen. So you might want to go take a look at that. Again, from a Colorado ICU room. And, Robert, I want to thank you for sending that along. It's really a good one. I can usually pick apart a ghost photograph and say, well, it's this or it's that. But if you look carefully at the mirror, the objects reflected and all the rest of it, there's nothing at all bogus about this one. On the wildcard line, you are on the air. Good morning.
Yes, Art.
Hello there.
This is Lee from Phoenix.
Yes, Lee.
I got a ghost story for you.
Good one?
Well, you be the judge. When I was a kid and freshman in high school and got to run around with other kids on Friday and Saturday nights dragging the main and stuff, one of the guys, older guys, says, have you guys been out to the cemetery? He says, the damnedest thing. He says, we was out there a couple of weeks ago with our girlfriends, because sometimes they'd go out there and they'd find a place and they'd park and make out with their girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
He says, we got out and he says, we went up to, and he said, there was this one grave that had this enormous upright headstone that was taller than we were. And the girl said to us, she says, I didn't know we were by this one. She says, let's go back to the car. He says, well, why? He says, because it's haunted. He says, what do you mean? She says, if you say, there's no man buried there. And he says, if you walk up and you stand at the foot at the stroke of midnight and say, hey, old man, what are you doing there? He'll answer you back and he'll say, nothing at all. Anyway, we said to our friend, no, we'd never heard about it. So he drove us out there. There was about 4 of us. We were just kind of really nervous. And we did. We walked up, stroke of midnight, and stood like he said, and sure as heck, the old man answered back and he said, nothing at all.
And you heard that clearly?
Don't you get it, Art?
Yes, I do. Nothing at all.
Thank you, Art.
You're welcome. That's fairly normal in the world of spirits. A repetitive this and repetitive that. I don't think any one of us want to think that that we just sort of hang around in the place where our body is returning to the earth slowly, year by year, and do the same thing over and over again. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Yes. Hi. This is Bill from Southern California.
Hi, Bill.
I got a ghost story for you.
Fire away.
It deals with Native American burials.
Okay.
You still there?
Yeah, I'm right here. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm an archaeologist. I don't have a PhD, but I do have a master's. And I was working on a survey crew, and we found an area that had a lot of broken pottery and whatnot. And we flagged it, and we went on, came back to it a couple of days later, started excavating, and equipment failure, like you would not believe. Laptops would go dead. You come out of an area, they come back on. You go back in, they go back off.
Oh.
Generators the same way for lights and stuff. It was just a crazy deal.
In other words, something was taking all the energy, at least temporarily, from whatever you brought in that had it.
Yes, sir, it was.
Right.
And our little base camp that we had set up, we had a cook and everything. The first night there, our personal equipment we found in trees and scattered all over the place, so we thought it might have been animals or something.
Mm-hmm.
Second night, the cook, he came out the next morning. He was mad because everything, around the camp cook area was just scattered all over the place. When we started excavating, we started finding human remains. Well, that brought the Native American in to monitor this area. And this was going on for like almost a week. Finally, we got a hold of one of the elders, and
usually archaeologists or anybody else are prohibited from digging in areas of that kind, aren't they?
It depends on what they're going to do. If they're going to put a freeway through, or if they're digging like a pipeline, they got to remove the remains, or they try to reroute it.
Right.
That kind of thing. Well, where we were at, it was going right through the center of the valley, and they couldn't reroute to the area.
Got it.
For fiber optics.
Okay, so how did it resolve?
Say again?
How did it end?
Oh, how did it end?
Yes.
Well, the elder got a hold of a spiritualist, not a shaman, but a spiritualist, and he told us if we wanted to come and go into a sweat lodge, we could sweat out and do some incantations that he had done. And then once we'd done that, he gave us each a piece of ribbon, or colored cloth, and he told us to carry one piece with us and tie one piece onto our tent.
Mm-hmm.
Those that went, nothing happened. Those that didn't, everything happened over again.
In other words, things scattered, things going off. Got it. Well, once again, I don't think I would go digging in such an area. And usually, as I mentioned, once you begin discovering a Native American artifacts, they stop you from digging almost immediately, and for a very good reason. First-time caller line, you're on the air.
Good morning, Art. I just wanted to fill you in on a story that I was lucky enough to experience myself. My name's Chris. I live in Virginia.
Yes, Chris.
When I was a child, I was staying over at my aunt's house, who had a furnished basement. It was the middle of the night, about 2 in the morning. I hadn't slept yet, and I made sure to double check and make sure I hadn't slept in this situation. Excuse me. Anyway, while I was sitting there attempting to go to sleep, a lady appeared. You have to understand the area that I was at also used to be a battlefield for the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So this lady appears in a beautiful gown, and a gentleman came up to her. These were full-bodied apparitions, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Completely visible.
Almost solid.
Almost solid. All right.
Yeah. I mean, they were very close to it.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, he was wearing a blue uniform, so obviously I think we have an idea of what side he was on.
Yes.
And they embraced, and they were seemed to be having a romantic interlude, I'd have to call it.
Wow.
All of a sudden, a gentleman in gray appeared in a tattered gray beat-down uniform.
Right.
With bayonet in hand. He ran up on the gentleman in blue and started sticking him.
My God.
Over and over, repeatedly gutting this gentleman with the bayonet. And when I say gutting, I mean intestines hanging off the end of the bayonet kind of gutting. Oh. It was quite nasty. And then after a few moments of that sticking him, and she's, forgive the term, freaking out, understandably, poof, vanish.
So it's like it's kind of like you had a north-south battle of manifest right in front of you on all, apparently, you I guess you would guess, over a woman.
That's the best way I can view it. The gentleman in blue, definitely dead. No question about that.
Was all this just visual, or did you hear things as well?
You could hear little bits and pieces, but not very loud. You could hear, her crying kind of deal, her saying to stop. You could hear a groan here and there. You could hear a stick occasionally.
And so once all this was over, they all just faded away, huh?
There wasn't even fade away. It was a poof, gone.
Poof, gone. All right. Well, poof, gone is what we have to be right now. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. One correction. That episode was not Law and Order. The one in which the man was crushed by the train was Homicide: Life on the Street. So that was a few years yet earlier, but it was still an incredible episode. I wonder how many of you remember that. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. Now, listen, everybody, unscreened calls. We're not screening the calls at all, so it's up to you. They've got to be good stories. The show will only be as good as your stories. One story per customer. Please try to use anything but a cell phone. And I still have yet detected a few cell phones, so please, if you can, get to a corded phone. Only the scariest stories need apply. We'll be right back. The following is from Bill in Rockford, Illinois. There's a house here in north central Illinois known to the locals simply as the Penfield Place. The house's eerie legacy began back around the turn of the century when a kitchen fire took the lives of 2 small children and a servant. Next, an undertaker took up residence, whose wife fell headlong down the main staircase there, breaking her back and her neck, killing her instantly. The funeral director's body was discovered a few months later in his own backyard, swaying from the branches of a maple tree where he had hanged himself in despair. Then the real tragedy commenced. A newlywed couple by the name of Penfield bought the place, moved in, and one night, not long after, the young bride, Mara Penfield, went missing. The jealous husband was always suspected in her disappearance, but nothing ever came of it, not until a decade later in the 1940s, when 17-year-old Mara Penfield was finally found again. Her sad remains were unearthed by some workmen in the backyard of her former home, buried beneath that infamous maple. She'd been stabbed, rolled up inside an oriental carpet, appendages dismembered and removed to only God and the killer knows where. Her missing limbs were never found. After that, the house went really bad. Future tenants would experience a frightening presence there, one which loomed over them as they slept and circled the bed, sometimes even touching their extremities inquisitively. A soft voice could be heard whispering, "Am I dead? Am I dead?" And once an abomination was witnessed by a group of New Year's Eve revelers, a hideous shape crawling across the second-floor stair landing in the darkness as if searching blind for something. When somebody let out a scream, the form raised up suddenly and glided away, nightmarish and black with no face to speak of. The large dwelling eventually fell victim to neglect and was converted into a tenement room and boarding. But I can distinctly remember once in the 1970s when a young expectant mother living there broke out in a high fever one night and miscarried inside that same shuttered house, giving birth afterward to a stillborn boy at a nearby hospital. A stillborn baby boy, extremely misshapen and underdeveloped, no legs, no arms. The rambling old Penfield Place still stands today, decaying and in ruins, a monument to all our very worst fears as human beings. First-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello? Yes, hello. Turn your radio off, please.
Hello?
Hi.
Is this Art?
It is.
Hi, Art. This is Judy from Huntsville, Alabama.
Hi, Judy.
I just wanted to tell you a story about a doll.
A doll?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. My mother and Dad bought me a doll. The last one they ever bought me was the size of a 3-year-old child. One night, many years later, I had the doll standing up in the corner of the bedroom. I was reading a book, and all of a sudden, out of my peripheral vision, I saw something move.
Yes.
And it startled me, of course, and I looked up, and I looked toward the doll, and the doll raised its arm and put it down.
Oh, brother. Now, in this modern day, let me just stop you for a moment. I've seen the ads for them. Today they sell dolls that are, like a 3-year-old size, a 2 or 3-year-old size, and infant size.
Right.
And they do move, and they do They do say things. They even memorize the name you give them.
Right, but I'm 58 years old.
I hear you. So there was no name memorized, or there was no movement. This was just a doll.
Just a plain doll, the size of a 3-year-old child.
And you saw her raise her arm.
She raised it up. She put it down. It, of course, terrified me.
Yes.
You know, I broke out in a cold sweat. And the only thing I knew to do was to go and pick the thing up and take it and put it in the den. And I did that. Well, the next day I told my family about it. And, you know, of course, some believed me, some didn't. My mother said, well, I don't want you to do away with the doll because that's the last one we bought you. You know, it's sort of sentimental.
Sure.
She took it over to her apartment. She said, I'll keep it. Okay.
Yes.
Things started happening at her apartment. She woke up one night out of a deep sleep, and she said standing beside her bed was a dark figure. And the only way she could describe this, it was during Star Wars, was it looked like Darth Vader. But, you know, to me, it was like a demon.
Oh, my God.
You know,
not the doll, though.
No, it wasn't the doll. It was a dark figure standing beside her bed.
Do you think the doll brought this to her?
I think it did. And also, she had a plant on a plant stand. And I've seen this in other stories before about possession and different things like this. The plant was shaped by itself.
Oh, boy.
And my mother was a very smart woman. You know, she wasn't given to delusions or anything like that. And she started telling me all this stuff. And I said, well, I think we need to get rid of this doll. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I think I'm going to try to get in touch with Ed and Lorraine Warren and try to, you know, see if there's something wrong with this doll.
So did you get rid of it?
Well, I got married. My husband put the doll out at the trash, and they picked it up. So I have no idea where the doll is now, but I hope no little child has the doll.
It's probably out just walking around the trash yard somewhere.
I don't know, but this is the truth. I mean, I'm a nurse. I'm not a person given to delusions or hallucinating or anything like that. But
trust me, I believe you.
I don't like dolls.
That's why we do these programs. Thank you very much. We do them because these things really do happen. I've had, and I won't go into details, but I've had a few cursed things like dolls sent to me. And some pretty strange stuff happened. People come into the possession of something like what she was just talking about, that doll, and they don't know what to do with it. And so they end up, in the old days, when I was doing a 5-day, 6-day-a-week show, they'd send them to me, and they would tell me this, whatever it is, I won't go into what it was, is cursed. Well, mistakenly, I did keep something for a few days, and what a mistake that was. Good morning, west of the Rockies. You're on the air.
Hello. I'm calling about a man under a table in Bishop,
turn your radio off for me, sir. That's number one.
Yeah, I'm calling about a ghost in Bishop, California, under a bed, under a table.
Under a table or a bed?
A table. I was sleeping in my uncle's sister's house in Bishop, California. We were on vacation, and I was sleeping in the living room facing the kitchen. And when I woke up at 3 in the morning, I heard voices calling me from the kitchen. I woke up, and everyone was asleep around the living room, and I could see the kitchen. I looked in the kitchen. I got up. I could see somebody under the table calling me with his hand. I could see his dark figure calling me.
Actually, audibly calling you, or sort of beckoning you to come?
A guy under the table calling me, like, come here, like, come to the dark side. I'm like, fuck that. I mean.
Okay, well, all right. Unfortunately, you just used some language that I can't have on the air, so I had to eliminate that. That's what happened there, folks. I understand that people get very emotional when they're telling a story, but there are certain words, the deadly 7, I think they are, that have been articulated that you cannot use on the air, and so we have a special little thing to eliminate that, and that's what just happened. He got to a part in the story where he indicated emotionally with the word we couldn't use that he was not about to follow the suggestion of that ghost. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Good morning. Hello? Wildcard.
From Los Angeles?
Yes, Los Angeles.
Hi, how are you? Happy Halloween.
I'm just fine.
Okay, this is my story.
Okay, turn your radio off first, dear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's going to be very confusing for you otherwise, because we're putting you directly on the air. So,
okay, it's off.
All right, all right. And what is your first name?
Rebecca.
Rebecca, go right ahead.
Hi. Okay. This happened many, many years ago, and hate to say it, but a friend of mine and I were using a Ouija board, and I have since learned not to use Ouija boards, but this was before I knew better.
Yes.
And we were talking to, various spirits, and we eventually got an evil spirit that came on. So we decided, okay, let's get rid of the evil spirit, and that was enough for the night. And it kind of freaked us out a little bit. And the evil spirit was basically saying how she wanted to kill my friend, and she was going to get my friend and all this kind of stuff.
Oh my God.
So before I left my friend's apartment where we were doing the Ouija board, I told her, well, I don't know much about this stuff, but I'll try and help you however way I can to, prevent you from being killed. So I left her apartment to go home, and it was around 2 a.m. at that time. And I'd taken maybe about 10 steps out of her apartment, and, it was pitch black, no one was up, completely quiet. And all of a sudden, I heard something. It was like someone stood right next to me and screamed in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
And what it said was, "Don't help her, you jerk. Don't help her, you jerk."
God.
So, of course, that totally freaked me out. So I ran back to my friend's apartment, and I'm like, help, let me in.
Sure.
So she calmed me down a little bit, and we kind of talked about it. And what she said is that she was going to send her guardian angel home with me to kind of protect me, because now we thought this thing might be after me. So I kind of poo-pooed it. I was like, yeah, right, her guardian angel. But, I figured, why not? Because I didn't really know too much about it and didn't know if I believed or not. But it was getting late, so I eventually go back out to my car, and I'm starting to drive home, and I'm driving along on the freeway. Then all of a sudden, as I'm driving along, bam, right in the passenger seat of my car, this man appeared.
Wow.
Like fully formed, completely solid, not like ghostly, wearing jeans and a shirt, and he basically turned towards me, smiled, waved, and then disappeared. And I was like, wow, the guardian angel really did follow me home.
Well, maybe. I mean, these are reasons why you don't screw around with Ouija boards, because what happens is you open doors that you didn't expect to open and that you cannot close.
Well, I realize that now.
And so I take it now if somebody presented you with a Ouija board and said, let's have some fun, you'd go the other way.
Yeah, exactly, because I did use the Ouija board a few times after that, but every time I did, I noticed my life would get bad. Bad stuff would start happening, and I finally connected it, so I got rid of my Ouija board. And
so you're not a real fast learner.
Well, it's been like 10 years since I've used one, so it's been quite a while.
All right, thank you. It's pretty widely known that years ago I did use a Ouija board. I won't tell the story. It scared me so badly. What occurred scared me so badly. Maybe one day I'll tell the story. Don't use a Ouija board. Don't screw around with the Ouija board. That really is a lesson that you ought not have to learn the hard way. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Morning. In 1958, I was 10 years old. It was a family tradition that we would meet at my grandmother's house on Easter Sunday. My mother had gone up on Friday, and my father was an Atlanta City policeman, big man, never saw him afraid of anything in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He picked me up, and we headed for a small town in Tennessee. On the way up, all my life, and my brothers and sisters, we'd passed this house that had an iron gate, and we called it the haunted house. My dad's, I stopped. I said, Dad, can we stop and look? And we didn't have anything to do, and he wasn't too eager to get to my grandparents' house too early. So we got out and went in. Dad walked up on the front porch, and I started up a flight of stairs inside. And, like a kid with a little bravado, I ran right to the top of the steps. As soon as I got to the top of the steps, there was about a 3-year-old girl standing looking at me. A little blonde-haired girl, nothing extraordinary about her. And I said, Dad, there's a girl up here. My dad thought maybe some squatters were in the house. And he ran up the steps behind me, and as soon as the little girl saw my dad, she just went straight across the hall into a bedroom and slammed the door. My dad walked up to the bedroom door. My dad was a big man. He was not afraid of anything. He pushed the door. The door pushed him back so hard he almost fell down. That made my dad mad. He got up and gave the door the boot. The door flew off the hinges, and we went in the room. It was about a 11 by 11 bedroom, 2 windows going outside, and my dad went over to them and couldn't open either one. There was a closet in the room. My dad opened the closet, and the closet was just 4 walls, wood panel, solid. My dad knocked on everything in the room. He knocked all over the floor, and we found nothing. So my dad and I went back outside, and my mother was related to the sheriff in a small town right where we were. And my dad went down there. He thought that people were squatting there, and it also alarmed him that the little girl might be in some kind of trouble.
Sure.
My dad told the officer there what had just taken place, and the officer went into the chief's office, and the chief was related to my mother. And the chief came out and called my dad and I into another office. And he opened a file cabinet, and he pulled out a file, and the file was a newspaper article. That house had belonged to a doctor that the copper company had brought in there to treat their miners. The doctor was in Atlanta. The doctor's wife evidently had a boyfriend. And the doctor came back to his home. His maid told him that his wife wasn't there, that she was downtown. He went downtown. He shot the lover. He shot the mother, went back to the house, and shot the little girl and shot himself.
Oh, my God. And so that little girl, or her spirit, or what was left of her, remains in that house.
The article went on to say that people heard the little girl. He shot the maid also, but the little girl was the last alive, and she went running up the steps screaming, and then a gunshot.
Wow. I really appreciate your story, sir, and your call. I don't know, again, what this tells us about life after death. Many ghost stories are associated with violent deaths. Many ghost stories are associated with suicides. In other words, some sort of very traumatic, unfulfilled, unrequited love. All of these things seem to bring about a continued presence. Now, whether this is a contemporary awareness or it's just some sort of echo of what was, it's hard to say. Either way, it certainly is freaky. Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hello, yes, this is Coast to Coast?
Yes, it is. Ghost to Ghost. Turn your radio off, please.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm Kevin Palmer. Sorry for the last name. I'm Kevin in Iroquois Falls, Ontario.
Yes.
And I have to say, the first time I listened to Coast AM, I get it through the internet. I was listening to older episodes, and I invoked a demon when I listened to Coast AM.
While you were listening to Coast?
Well, I got into Coast AM after through my friends on Pal Talk, and they sent me a link for some of the shows, and I invoked a demon when I was listening to Pal Talk, and his name is JC.
All right, thank you very much for the call. That's not exactly a ghost story, although there's a little bit of terror certainly involved in it. JC. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. We'll be right back. Fascinating. How many stories I get from police officers, ER nurses, and doctors, but they don't ever want to be named, or rarely. I protect them anyway. Matt from Plainfield, Illinois, says, this is just a fast blast. I used to be a narcotics detective. One night I was called to the scene of a drug-related murder. When I arrived, I saw a man standing over the dead body telling him to get up. Long story short, it was the dead man yelling at his own corpse. We'll be right back. You know, even though what we're doing tonight are ghost stories, this is really all about whether there is some kind of existence after physical death, right? Barbara says, not that scary, but this is the reason I believe our spirits go on after we leave our physical bodies. In 2000, my ex-wife and I were expecting our youngest son. I was in the Navy at the time. We lived in San Diego. I was on a 6-week exercise in Hawaii when I got a sudden Red Cross message that I needed to get home. My ex-wife had to have emergency surgery, and there was a very good chance she'd lose the baby at 5 months. I was able to get emergency leave and a plane ticket, made it to the hospital 21 hours later, just before she went in. The surgery went fine, though there were a few touchy moments, and we went home a few days later. Over the next couple of months, my ex began talking in her sleep. The conversations always sounded friendly, though I could never make out quite what was said. She'd never talked in her sleep before and didn't say anything about having strange dreams, so I left it alone. She was put on bed rest, and we were at the doctor's office about twice a week. I was worried and prayed every night for my son to be healthy. My ex went into labor, and it was a problem, and then another problem, and a problem after that. There were issues with the pain medication they'd put her on, problems with monitoring equipment, you name it, it happened. When my son was born, he didn't have a heartbeat, wasn't breathing, and was a light blue color. I think every doctor in the hospital that night was in the room, and I can't say enough good things about them. They placed my son on a cart and ran out of the room. There were people taking care of my ex, trying to make sure she was going to make it, so I went to find my son. I was not familiar with that area of the hospital, and there wasn't anybody around to ask because everybody was trying to either care for my ex or my son. I heard someone call my name on my right side, so assuming it was a doctor, I went towards the sound. Then another voice called my name from down the hall. I'm running down the hall, and the word "here" filled my head. I really can't describe it. I looked, and there was my son being worked on. I walked into the room. The doctor looked at me. He had this look on his face, and I just know it wasn't good. The nurses just looked at me. I began to cry because I knew my son was dead. Now, this is where it all gets a little strange. I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. It was very fast, so I looked in that direction. There wasn't anything there. I walked over to where the little baby was and was going to touch him, my hand an inch over his chest. The doctors were doing whatever they were doing a little away from me. They'd totally given up. Then out of the blue, my son starts slightly moving and lets out this huge, strong cry. Of course, I jumped a little. I lost my balance and began to fall backward. I turned a little, trying to right myself and see the window. Both of my grandmothers were there in the reflection, smiling. And it looked as if they were staring at the table, smiling at my little boy. After that, he did have a few medical problems, a couple of surgeries to fix a few things. Now, a healthy 7-year-old. The only thing about him is, well, that's strange. He talks from time to time about angels that he sees at night. He says that sometimes they're old ladies, sometimes they're mommy's age, but he says they always look kind of the same. I did find a picture of one of my grandmothers a couple of years ago, and he pointed to it right away and said, "Granny." So I'm sure they came to help. That's our story. Happy Halloween. East of the Rockies, you are on the air. Good morning.
Art.
Yes.
This is Wayne from Pennsylvania. And my dad, he had 16 brothers and 5 sisters, and he was the 7th son. And one time, I had he bought me a box of Cracker Jacks with a toy in it, and I took it upstairs and put it in my drawer.
I remember those toys, yes.
And so I went down and played outside a little bit. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I decided to go up and get it. And then the door was locked. There was no lock on the door. It was like, I couldn't push it open. So I looked under the door, and I could see these feet look like dog feet. And I was pushing, all of a sudden, it opened. I seen it going out the window, and my toy was gone. And
So something like a dog had taken your toy, not let you in the room?
All I seen is just 2 dog feet, like. I didn't see the rest of the body.
But they were like dog feet.
Yeah, and my toy was gone. It went out the window quick. And then what really got me, when I was about 14, and my mom and my dad were separated, and all of a sudden about 2 o'clock in the morning, there was like a big explosion in my head, and I got up, ran out in the kitchen, and my mom, she asked me, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "Something's wrong with Dad," because he worked, distance away, and she goes, "Nah, it can't be." I said, "Mom, there's something's going on because I have a feeling something's wrong," and then about an hour later, she got a phone call. He got hit by a truck and trailer.
I'm so sorry. That there are so many stories like that. For some reason, people, they seem to know when something awful has happened to a relative. Now, I have no idea how that happens or why that happens, but it does. That communication takes place. A relative somewhere has died, and as that man said, it's like an explosion in your head. You just suddenly know. And you've got to ask yourself, what mechanism transmits that message? It's really as mysterious as other things that we cannot explain. Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. I have a story about EVPs for you.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Niagara Falls, Canada.
Okay.
And my name is Cindy.
Okay, Cindy.
Hi. We were, my boyfriend, myself, and a friend decided to go ghost hunting, and we brought our digital recorders with us, and we were out in a graveyard down in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I'm not sure if you're aware, if you know where that area is or not.
I do, yes.
Okay, we were down in one of the graveyards down there, and so we were there for about an hour, and we were just about to leave, and my boyfriend goes, "Well, why don't you try just ask a couple more questions before we leave?" So anyways, we asked a couple more questions, and then my friend, for some reason, goes, "Oh, I wonder if somebody's going to come home with us." And I'm like, "That's not even funny. Don't even joke about that, right?" So then we get into the car, and I'm like, "Well, let's listen to what we've got, right, see if we have anything." So we're driving back. We get to the part on the tape, or not, it wasn't in tape because it was digital, but we get to that part where she says that, and clear as day you hear on it, "Go home." And we don't know who it was. It wasn't like any of us saying it, but as clear as day you could hear somebody say, "Go home."
Go home. And I assume you kept going home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we did.
That's because EVPs work. Now, what they are, of course, we don't know, but we know they're real. That's why I continue to have my EVP guests on the air, because they're real. And if you doubt it, get a recorder. If you've got the cojones for it, take it to a graveyard or somewhere else where there might be spirits about. Do a few hours of recording. Come home. And, then send me an email or let me know what was said. Fact of the matter is, EVP works. What it really is, we have no way of knowing. But it's not a joke, and those who take the time and trouble to really go out and try it inevitably get something they cannot explain. First-time caller line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. This is Vince from Wyoming. I got a ghost story for you.
Yes, well, it's got to be extra good since you're on a cell phone.
Okay, well, going across Pennsylvania one time, back in the 70s, the truck got awful cold inside. Look over in the passenger seat, and there's like an entity sitting there.
Oh, well, this is good.
Well,
when you say an entity, describe, if you can, what you saw.
Very, very light shade of white.
Okay.
And that was it.
In the form of a human being, or what?
No, I can't say it was in the form of a human being. It was just something in white was sitting over there in that passenger seat.
And you managed to stay on the road?
Yeah. It didn't bother me.
It didn't bother you?
Not at all.
Okay, I appreciate the call, but I don't understand that at all. If something manifested itself next to me on a truck or car seat I would be awfully lucky to stay on the road. In fact, I don't know how I'd stay on the road. No idea at all. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hi, my name is Tanya.
Hi, Tanya.
Hey, I just want to say that I've had several ghost experiences in my life.
Well, we only have time for one, so give us your best.
Okay, let me think about it. Well, I just moved recently to Washington State, and two separate instances of a very similar kind of event. I was laying in bed, and I felt like something was walking towards me, and I was like, what? I looked up, nothing was there. Laid back down, and then I felt something getting close to me again. I was trying to ignore it, and nobody was in the room except for me, and I felt something like lean on me, toward, like kind of on my chest, and then something screamed into my right ear, just like screamed. And then a separate incident, which was the same kind of thing, same kind of pressure on me, and something screamed in my right ear the second time, but it said, save me. It screamed like, save me.
Really? And what did you do?
Oh, strange enough, I wasn't really that scared because I've had some other experiences before, but I tried just to go back to bed. The first one, I actually jumped out of bed and I said, okay, I better get in the shower and wake up. The second one, it was actually right before I went to sleep, and I just was like, okay, I'm going to ignore this, put the cover over my head and go back to bed. But it was really weird.
Well, the words save me have obvious meaning, so didn't you feel compelled to get up, investigate, and try to help somebody?
Well, I mean, honestly, when I heard something yell "save me," it was like really only in my right ear, and I felt like something. It felt like something's leaning on your chest, kind of. Originally, I thought my boyfriend was sleeping right next to me, and I thought, well, maybe his psychic energy. At first, I thought maybe his psychic energy was like telling me something. I don't know, but a tree fell down behind our house maybe around that time, and he said maybe the tree was trying to say "save me." I don't know, but I was like, I had to go to sleep. I had to go to work the next day, so I was like, okay, I'm like kind of scared, so I'm just gonna try to just go to sleep. But it freaked me out. I mean, the first one that happened, I jumped out of bed and I thought, this, whatever it is trying to tell me to it's like trying to get me out of bed. It's like, don't sleep anymore. It was like saying, you gotta get out of bed and start the day.
Okay, well, if that had happened to me, I'm sure it would have worked. I doubt that I would have slept the rest of the night. Whether or not I would have got, awakened and tried to help somebody, I don't know. East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hi, Art.
Hello.
Is, Mike from Indianapolis.
Hi, Mike.
And I am just calling. I had a story when I lived in Kentucky in 1993, and it's very interesting, and it involves some pretty famous landmarks there in Kentucky. To begin with, I was a teenager, a senior in high school, and I had missed my bus for school. And seeing as I really had to graduate, and I didn't want to get get in trouble from my father, I decided I better get to school as fast as I can.
For me, that was usually a reason to stay home. Missed the bus, Mom.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it seemed to be around this time, actually, probably beginning of November. And there's a place there called Valley Station, Kentucky, and I was going to school, and I kind of ran a lot when I was younger, and so I was kind of jogging, and I was new to the area at the time. I just moved there, and what happened was I decided to take a shortcut, and from this experience, it is ill-advised, and I took the shortcut to get to school, on time, a little bit earlier to not get in trouble. So I'm jogging up this hill, and I pass this golf course, and I get to the end of the top of this hill, and it is a place called Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and of course everybody's heard of it now, but at the time, I had no idea, of the actual experiences there. But, I was jogging, I had my headphones on, and decided, at the time that place was abandoned in around 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm jogging through this place because the gate is usually, it's left open. And so I'm jogging through, and I get, heading west towards what's known as Dixie Highway. And I get to the, top of the hill, and I pass the actual hospital, and I'm listening to my headphones, and my music's blaring, and I head, past the hospital and get to the behind of it, to the west side of it. To the right of me was a strange shed, and to the left of me was another kind of strange angled down shed-looking thing. I'm not sure to this day. I've never been there other than this time.
Okay, so what happened?
So actually what happened was I had stopped to take a break, and so I'd stopped, and I decided to turn off my headphones, and when I did, there was these strange sounds of voices, and it seemed like hundreds of them all around me, at the time, but I had no idea that this place was supposedly haunted, and I'm, not very easily scared. So I had, I turned around and said, shut up. And right at that instance, there was no more voices, and all the voices had shut up, all at once. And I said, it's kind of odd. And I looked to my right of me at this shed, and in the window is this black shadow-like figure that many people see with the red eyes. And it just seemed to look at me with an eerie look, and I got scared. And I started running down the other side of the hill to the back side of the hospital as fast as I could. And I was running and running and had a feeling, like just things were around me. And I got to the bottom of the hill toward these railroad tracks. And what seemed to appear out of nowhere was a man and his dog. And this dog came running up to me, and it was a Rottweiler, a large Rottweiler. And I was getting scared, and I told the man, hey, does your dog bite? And the man never answered. It was a man in a trench coat, a large man with a long beard. And I repeatedly said, hey, does your dog bite? Does your dog bite? And he says, he never says anything until the dog comes up to me and just seems to barely nudge my pant leg and looks over at the man. And then the man, says something, says, who are you? And I say my name, Mike, and I just got here from Chicago. I thought actually that I was walking through a marijuana field and a guy was getting mad. So it happens a lot, in Kentucky, and so I'm thinking, I better keep it cool. He's going to get this dog on me, and so I say, hey, I'm just late for school, I'm passing on through.
Okay, Mike, we've got to get to the end of it here.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I say, okay, I'm sorry, and the guy, I say, I'm late for school, bye, and the guy says, okay, leave, and don't look back. And so I run off, and I'm walking down the railroad tracks towards the Doss High School over there, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to look back, and what man is not going to look back?
Right.
And as I look back, the man and his dog is gone, but in that field where I was standing was about over 100 apparitions, gray-looking figures.
What had been all those voices?
Yeah. And and were just looking at me. And I ran to school, and for a long time, nobody believed me until recently I had found out that place was so famous. And I just wanted to let that story out, and I just wanted to let people know
that it really is true. Mike, what do you think happens to you after you die?
I'm really not sure, but I think that there probably is heaven and hell because, I don't see why a book like the Bible would survive for so many years. And,
it's a good point, but if there really is a heaven and hell, then where had these people come from, Mike?
Well, maybe they had just, like the stories go, usually maybe the stories are right, and they are, excuse my French, damned or cursed.
And just around. Thank you very much for the call, Mike. So, in this case, hundreds of spirits, first in voice, and then almost in flesh. Ghost to Ghost 07, you're on a ride, all right, and you just never know when it's going to end. Remember, folks, we're doing unscreened ghost stories from you, all of you. So, one story per caller. Please try not to use a cell phone. Get to a corded phone if you can, and only the very scariest stories. If it didn't scare you, it's very unlikely to scare us. Back with more in a moment. Remember, turn your radio off right away when I pick up. Here's a ghost story from an emergency room in Arizona. Art, I'm an X-ray technician who was working at an Arizona hospital back in the winter of 2006. My work hours at the time, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., graveyard shift, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On a Saturday morning, around 1 or 2 in the morning, the ER called to tell my partner that an ambulance was en route with a 50 to 60-year-old male patient that was non-responsive with a thready pulse. We were to stand by and be ready to do a portable chest X-ray post-trachea intubation. When the time came, my partner went to do this portable X-ray, leaving me alone in the X-ray control room not more than 4 or 5 minutes after he had left. An older white male dressed in faded blue jeans and a stained white T-shirt came to the door of the control room. Now, this is a difficult task because you need an electronic card key to access the area at this time of night. So I looked up from my paperwork, noticed this man, and asked, "Sir, can I help you?" He seemed to be looking for something or someone, but didn't answer. I asked again, "Sir, can I help you? Are you looking for someone? Are you lost?" This time, he raised his bright blue eyes in my direction and seemed to look right through me. The man said, "No, son, I think I've found my way." He gave me a sad smile, shook his head, and moved from the doorway toward the direction of the ER. So I got up and went to the open door and looked down the long hallway, didn't see anyone. I then checked the adjoining hallways, the 2 X-ray suites, even our file room, no trace of anybody. Being a little confused, I went back down the hall to the ER department to check on my coworker's progress, shaking my head the whole way. When I finally got to the nurse's desk, I asked an RN friend if she'd seen the man I described. She gave me a funny look, said he was in trauma room 1, where my partner was supposed to be performing the emergency chest X-ray. I went to the trauma room door, walked in, just in time to see the physician declare the time of death on the man I saw in the X-ray control room not more than 15 minutes prior. Needless to say, I must have looked like the one who was white as a ghost. Robbie from Phoenix, Arizona. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning, Art. This is Beverly from Dayton, Ohio.
Hi, Beverly.
Yes, I would like to share one of my spooky moments.
Go right ahead.
Well, back in the mid-'70s, when The Exorcist first came out, my husband and I bought a home, and it was in the country and a lovely setting, and the newness of the home. Every evening when I was fixing supper, the basement door would open up.
All by itself?
All by itself. And I thought, well, maybe it's just the settling of the house and the change of the season. But night after night, the door would open right around the same time. And then my son, he would say that there was something that was coming into his room, and it was scary.
Oh.
Yeah, and of course you dismiss these types of activities because it's a new home. And then one evening, my husband and I were asleep, and we both had a vision or a dream at the same time. We saw our daughter being raised up out of her bed and slammed to the floor.
My God. And you both had this dream at the same moment?
At the same moment, and the whole house shook, and we flew up out of bed and ran to her room, and there she was on the floor, but she was sound asleep and unharmed, and we knew then we had an entity in the home.
What did you do? Did you remain in that home?
Well, eventually I did move out, but we got holy water. I threw away my book, The Exorcist.
I don't know what I'd do. I doubt that I'd remain in the home. I'd get buckets of holy water. I'm not sure what I would do.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people with knowledge how to release demons or entities recommended blessing each room with holy water. And then they said a lot of times there might be a new toy or something that you've brought in the home. because these entities like to hide in objects.
Yes.
Well, there was one particular teddy bear that was fairly new, and it was handmade. That was a gift to my daughter. And I never felt comfortable with this teddy bear. So my husband, when I had mentioned that to him, he instantly grabbed the teddy bear, threw it in the fireplace.
My goodness. Teddy bears, dolls, it's not been a good night for toys.
Really, but the unusual thing, you would think by handmade stuffed teddy bear, it would be consumed in just a few minutes. It took hours for this teddy bear to burn.
God.
And the fire would dance from eye to eye, back and forth.
I'd be so out of that house. Oh, my God.
Well, in a few months, I did leave. the children and I, we vacated. We found another place to live.
Oh, that'd be it. I'll tell you, if we had dual dreams, went in, found our daughter on the floor, that would be it right there. But
yes.
Thank you very much for the call.
Thank you so much.
Take care. That's a freaky one. Can you imagine that, having a dual dream about your daughter raising up out of the bed and being slammed to the floor and then going in the other room and finding her, albeit asleep, on the floor? Oh, God. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Excuse me. I was drinking. I wasn't expecting you to pick up. Drinking orange juice, got stuck.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hi.
I got a good one for you.
Fire away.
Okay. My family owned a funeral home, and I actually really didn't think of it as a ghost story until I thought about it, but I really didn't believe in ghosts. And about 3 years into my career, done plenty of removals, went to plenty of hospitals, been in plenty of morgues, been in plenty of homes. But this one peculiar situation came up where we were actually hired to remove a man from a hospital who was being frozen, cryonics. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but
I know about the procedure, sure.
And so I was on death watch that night. He was actually close to death for 3 days, and it was just a matter of waiting for him to take his last breath for the doctor to actually pronounce them, and then they give him the lethal shot of barbiturates and hook him up to a respirator, a heart-lung respirator, which actually pounds on his chest. Well, we did that, and not even thinking anything of it, we did the removal. I put him on the gurney, strapped in the gurney. This machine's pumping.
If I might, let me stop you for a second. I don't quite understand the procedure. In other words, the doctor pronounces him dead.
Correct.
Okay, but then he's given a lethal shot.
Lethal injection of barbiturates.
Why would that be necessary?
Well, from my understanding, because the heart-lung machine is put on almost immediately after he's pronounced dead.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And I asked the same question. I mean, I'm thinking the same thing, but I'm not really thinking this until about what I'm about to tell you actually happens.
Sure.
Anyways, I put him in the car. He's in the gurney. We're in the station wagon. The machine's pumping in the back, and I turn on the radio, and I'm just driving along. All of a sudden, in my mind, I hear like kind of a moan, and I look in the rearview mirror, and I shook my head. I said no. And then again, I heard this. Where are we going? And I look in the rearview mirror, and it was kind of like a ghostly image, but it was like I turn around and it's not there, but I see him actually sit up. And I turned around and I shook my head. I said, no. I said, this is in my head. And I turned the radio up. And as I turned the radio up, it got louder. Where are we going? And I pulled the car over. I put it in park. And I turned the radio off. I said, you've got to be kidding me.
Right.
And no, I said it out loud. I said, you have got to be kidding me. I said, I've been doing this for 3 years. And I said, I do one thing that is different. And can you hear me talking? He goes, yeah, where are we going?
My God.
I said, well, we're going to the funeral home. He goes, no, we're not supposed to go to the funeral home. I said, where are we supposed to go? He goes, I'm supposed to just wake up and be well again. I said, wow. I said, this is wrong what we're doing. He goes, well, what have I done? And I explained it to him. I'm sitting there in the car talking.
So you're having a full conversation with a dead man.
Well, that's going through my head. I was like, well, is he dead?
Well, if you're having that kind of conversation,
I'm sorry.
If you're having that kind of conversation, I'd be turning around or something. I mean,
I did. I turned around every time I would turn around.
I don't mean turn around in the car. I mean turn around and head back to the hospital. If you're having that kind of conversation with somebody, anyway, you go ahead, sir.
No, I know it wasn't with him in his physical body though. Because in the mirror, I could see him sit up, and I can visually, see him. But when I turned around, the machine's just going. But the weird thing was I didn't feel fear. I thought as I look back, I said I should have been running out of the car, screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
But this guy, and I knew this guy was stuck because he realized, and I realized, I felt horrible because we got paid a lot of money just to put this machine on this guy, and then bring him back to the funeral home, pack him in ice, and put him in an ambulance to be put into nitrogen. Right. And the thing is I actually had to coerce him to go because he was going to stay. He was going to stay in the funeral home. And my dad, I really haven't told this story to anybody, but my dad asked me. He goes, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "What we did tonight was wrong." I said, "This man is what he's expecting of this cryonics is not. I know for sure is not going to work and he's stuck. He was stuck.
Obviously, this man thought it was going to work.
Yes, he did." And he was going to stay. He was hanging out at the funeral home when the ambulance took off. I said, "You can't stay here."
Well,
what do I do? I don't know.
How did you finish up the conversation with the man?
I'm sorry?
How did you finish up the conversation with the man?
With telling him that he must go with his body in the ambulance, and he needs to figure out his path. I mean, it was weird, but I told him that he couldn't. I've never dealt with anything like this before, and he couldn't stay with me. It wasn't like he wanted to stay with me. He was stuck. It was like traumatic for him.
That'd be the last body I'd ever drive.
But it was freaking. That was the last cryonics situation we put ourselves into.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Just absolutely amazing. And how you kept your cool through that, I'll never know.
It was strange because I didn't, in my mind, and throughout my career, I had actually put it out of my mind. I said, you know what? There's got to be no such thing as ghosts because I deal with bodies every day, fresh death in situations, and I've never ever anything. And when I heard him say, "Where are we going?" and I saw him sit up in the rearview mirror, I pulled over and I said, "You've got to be kidding me."
I hear you. All right, sir. I really appreciate the story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe there's something different about the expectation of a spirit that was, frankly, expecting to wake up in good health. In other words, he was expecting to be cryonically frozen and to wake up one day in the far future healthy and probably wealthy if he had good investments. But instead, he woke up on the way to the cryonics lab, neither here nor there. That is a freaky story. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hey, Art, how's it going?
It's getting very interesting, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay, I guess you could call it a haunted house story. There was a farmhouse near where I grew up, big old house, and dated back to like the 1800s. But people had lived there on and off up to like the 1970s, and then it was vacant, and it was kind of set back on a dirt road, and we were teenagers and back in the early 80s, and we went there one night, and it was a big old house, and it wasn't really dilapidated or run down. It was just nobody had lived there for a while. Mm-hmm. And I'd been there a couple of times, and I was showing my friends around, and there was 6 of us. It was 3 boys and 3 girls, and 2 of the boys, 2 friends of mine, were farm boys, and down in the basement of this place was an old beat-up, broken-down old antique tractor, and they were down there looking at it. And me and the 3 girls were upstairs, and I was showing them. This place was pretty big, and it had like some old servants' quarters, which I thought was kind of neat. And I was showing them that. And so we were in the 2nd floor, and all of a sudden we heard this huge noise, big kaboom, smash, bang. Something was going down the stairs, obviously. and we ran out to look, and something or someone had thrown the toilet from the second-floor bathroom down the stairs.
Wow.
Now, we didn't hear it getting ripped out of the floor or anything. It was bolted into the floor. I remember that. There was no water, of course, hooked up. But while we were up there, something had torn that toilet out of the floor, carried it down the hall past us. We didn't hear anything, and threw it down the stairs. And
anything that could rip a toilet bolted in right out of the floor and then throw it down the stairs is nothing to be trifled with.
Right, and like I said, we didn't hear it getting torn out of the floor or anything like that. We just heard it go down the stairs, about 5 feet away from us. We were in
boom, 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 yeah.
And the kids from the basement came running up, and the girls, of course, they wanted to light out of there as quick as could be. And I'll tell you what, I was the first one out the door myself.
I was going to say, when it comes to that kind of thing, there's not a lot of difference between guys and gals.
No, well, we can run faster, and I'll tell you what, I ran the fastest that night.
That's an awful... And so this thing was just sitting at the bottom of the steps, and that's when you took off. Well, for once, I agree. I would have done the exact same thing.
Hey, happy Halloween, Art.
Well, happy Halloween to you, sir. All right. Art, in the mid-'90s, we sold our rural home, moved into a small town of about 6,000 people. We rented a quaint little house located beside a small church and graveyard in the center of town. We moved in 1 week before Halloween. Our 4 children were eager to decorate for the occasion and decked out the house and yard, including headstones on the lawn and a hangman's noose, which was suspended from a large willow tree beside the front door, including a very realistic dead man. We bought tons of goodies in anticipation of the throngs of ghouls that would visit that night. Halloween Eve came and went without one ghoul racing our door, even though we observed dozens of them greedily shuffling from door to door across the street. By midnight, we were feeling a bit rejected, very rejected, turned in for the night, only to be awakened by a blood-curdling scream coming from downstairs. I rushed to the stairs to find our 11-year-old daughter trembling in fear and staring up at something. I glanced up to see a hangman's noose suspended from seemingly nothing. It hung there a few seconds and then fell to the stairs, totally freaking us all out. Needless to say, no one got any sleep that night. The next day, I found what everyone else obviously already knew. Apparently, we were living in the old church rectory in which a former pastor of the neighboring church had hung himself. That's from Eileen in Alberta, Canada. So, as you can readily see, whether it be a layman or a priest, if the death comes in an unseemly way, a suicide, or in some unexpected, quick way, perhaps a body to be frozen forevermore and then awakened one day, healthy, wealthy, if not wise. Look out, folks. Isn't it fascinating? We all hope, even pray, that there's a life after this one. And yet, we don't seem all that thrilled when we hear or see evidence of it. Has that ever occurred to you? We'll be right back. The following is from Elizabeth in Morris Plains, New Jersey. My mother and I had to stay with my grandparents during World War II. My father was drafted when I was 9 months old, and he didn't come home till I was just about 5. My grandfather owned and he managed a funeral home on the first floor of a very large Victorian mansion. Mom and I lived on the 3rd floor, along with an aunt and an uncle who was in the Air Force stationed locally, so he could come home for the weekends. My grandparents' apartment was the entire 2nd floor, along with my youngest aunt. Grandpa told me when I was very young that, quote, these people are nice folks. They wouldn't hurt you. They wouldn't have hurt you when you were alive, and they won't do so now. I said, okay. And I was confident he told me the truth, at least until I was about 11. I made the usual walk through the casket showroom where an older man was getting readied for his family's visit. I felt all the hair on my head and body standing straight up, and I just knew that man was staring at me. I did a bit of whistling as I dashed out of the room and tore up the stairs to the safety of my grandmother. That night, I awoke in the very early morning hours, and there he was, standing at the foot of my bed, staring right at me. I took a deep breath and slowly pulled the covers over my head. I did not go to sleep. My ears were on super-sensitive settings all night, waiting for him to make his move. It was completely terrifying. I could barely breathe, and my heart was pounding. His funeral was held at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they finally dragged his sorry ass to the cemetery. I have never in my life been so terrified. Now I'm 64 years of age. I've always wondered what his problem was. I've got a theory. He was a child molester who couldn't figure out how to work with his new situation, death. I hope he stays planted. My second-floor bed was directly above his first-floor casket. I would never again, never agree to sleep over another soul who had passed over. Too risky. Wildcard line, you're on the air.
Hi, George. How are you tonight?
Pretty good, but I'm not George.
Oh, sorry. I mean, Art.
It's an understandable mistake. Go right ahead.
Okay, Art. Well, I am living in Austin, Texas right now. My name is Jessica, and I am from Victoria, BC, Canada originally. And my story is about there. A couple years ago, I was going to art school and had a part-time job at a grocery store. And a part of our art lessons were to go out into various parts of Victoria and, like, draw buildings and such things like that. So one field trip we had, we went to a grave site, and we started drawing, tombstones and stuff. So I remember I sat down. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Anyways, I sat down and I started drawing this tombstone, and this lady, it was a lady's name on there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I started drawing it, and that's not the whole story. But a couple weeks later, I'm working at the grocery store, and I was pretty much the only one there. It was a really small grocery store, and I'm sitting there with another cashier, and in walks this lady, and I can't see her because I have my back to the door. But the other cashier that I was working with, like, we were talking, blah, blah, and she looks at me like she was so freaked out. So I turn around, and I look, and I see this weird lady with this long black dress on. I'm totally not lying. She was wearing this long black dress, long, straggly hair, gross-looking skin, like grayish tone. And, like, I'm an artist, so I can tell, like, people's skin tones. Anyways, she freaked me out so much. Like, that was not what regular people looked like. So I screamed and ran away. That was, like, my first instinct was to just scream and run away. I couldn't believe it. And once I realized that I had screamed and ran away from this lady that I'm supposed to help, like, I'm in a grocery store, I realized this. I went back and said, I composed myself, and I said, can I help you? And she's like, I don't know where I am, like, in this really creepy voice. So I was, like, so freaked out by this lady. I looked at her, and I was really close, and her eyes looked like they were just held up by toothpicks, like it was, like, bugging out of her face. And I said, you don't know where you are? Let me call you a cab. So I said, what's your name? And she said, it's Elizabeth. And just a couple weeks earlier, when I was drawing this tombstone, I remember what the name of that lady was, and there were fresh flowers there, and it looked like it was a fairly fresh grave, and that name was Elizabeth. And I was so freaked out by this lady. Like, she did not look like she was walking. She looked like she was floating. Like, she had no footsteps at all, and just, like, shook me up so much. And it's been like 5 years, and I still get creeped out when I think about her.
Maybe by drawing that tombstone, you essentially called Elizabeth.
I have no idea, but I do know that Victoria, where I'm from in Canada, in the whole Pacific Northwest up there, is really, really big on witchcraft. And, like, I don't know if I had just seen that parallel between the living and the dead. But that person that I saw that, hovered at me was not human. And I don't really tell that story very much because, obviously I don't think people are going to take me seriously, but my first instinct, and I heard you were talking about this earlier, Art, was to scream and run. And I did. And I don't do that with people who are living and alive,
I hear you. All right. Thanks for the story. I really appreciate it. If something like that happened to me, if an obviously dead person was in front of me, floating in front of me with gray skin, eyes that just didn't look, I don't know, human, alive human, I'd scream. I'd run. I'm sure I would. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Art. This is Mitchell from Houston, Texas.
Yes, sir. In a truck, I bet, right?
I'm a trucker. It's the best I can do, but I've got a good story.
Okay.
All right. I was staying with acquaintances in Atlanta, Georgia a few years back on a business trip, and I'd rented a room from them. And one night I was calling my girlfriend back in Texas, and the line kind of went dead. And when she came back on, she said, well, I think there was a demon on the line or something. I couldn't hear you, and I rebuked it. And I was like, well, man, that's strange. I never heard her say anything like that before. But then I hung up the phone, turned over to go to sleep, and I started hearing, and I was the only one in the house this night. Everybody was gone. Started hearing kind of voices from the basement. It's like if you've ever been on a lake on a calm day and you can hear somebody kind of across the water, but you can't understand what they're saying.
Sure, it carries very well.
Exactly. And so the strange noise from downstairs is, and then I start hearing the stairs creak. And slowly something's coming up the stairs. So I'm like freaking out. The bedroom doors are shut, and I can still hear this. And this entity comes somewhere into my proximity. I don't ever see it manifest, but my skin's crawling. I feel like a Shar-Pei dog. And my hair's standing on end, and all I can do from my background is I'm thinking, play. So I start playing. And after a few minutes, it seems to have left, but I'm still, totally freaking out and so forth. But to get to the end of the story, this house, I had no idea, was haunted because this entity evidently had something to do with there was an incident there in Atlanta, Georgia, where a minister at Straight Laced Church had a gay lover, and he killed the lover in the basement of the house. So there was some really strange energy going around, and I got to experience what was left over. So, anyway,
all right, sir.
That's my story.
I appreciate your story. Thank you. But that's why we're not doing cell phones. It's very, very difficult to understand a lot of cell phones. And while they're fine for emergency communications and things like that, for telling ghost stories, they're not so good. Wildcard line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. This is Carl from Milwaukee.
How you doing?
Good. This involves my wife and her family. I had met her in high school, and for a while I went on a road, and when I came back, I met up with her again, and her father passed away, and like most of her family members, I guess, he had his body donated to medical science. And 2 years after we got married and moved into this house here, I have a dream. And in the dream, we're in the cemetery. And I don't know how I knew it was her dad, because I really don't have a lot of recollection about what he looked like or sounded like, but I knew it was him. And I asked, what are you doing here? And he says, I'm looking for my body. That's when I woke up. And when I woke up, I was even more scared because I couldn't move. And I barely was able to call out my wife's name twice. And the next morning, I was kind of miffed at her because, she didn't answer me. And I asked her, did you hear me call you? And she said, yes, I did. And I said, why didn't you reply? She says, because you sounded like my father.
Well, that's pretty strange, all right.
I don't know if, I have two explanations. I mean, I have narcolepsy, and people who have narcolepsy also have what's called cataplexy, which is paralysis. Now, which might have altered my voice, or it could be supernatural. I don't know.
It could have been some kind of sleep paralysis, or your body could have been taken over. In other words, one could go with the other, paralyzed, and then the voice that came from you was indeed not yours. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello?
Yes, I'm back, Art.
Yes?
Yes, I have a story to tell you.
Okay. This is your first call?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Los Angeles.
L.A. And you're on a cell phone, too, aren't you?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it goes. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, fine. This happened when I was about 21 years old. I had just been back from Vietnam, and I was staying with my grandmother for one day a week. She was about 87, 88 years old, and would take her to church one day a week, and everyone in the family would volunteer one day. So that night, I'm sleeping in my uncle's bed. This was the heir apparent to my grandmother's estate who died prematurely. He was going to inherit a great deal of money, and unfortunately, he died at 15 of pneumonia. I'm laying in his bed in my grandmother's home, and I was very emotional because I really missed this man. He treated me like his son, and I said a little prayer. I said, Uncle, I miss you with all my heart, and I would give anything to have you back again. And as I was falling asleep in this dark room, all of a sudden the light, great light engulfed the room where the light permeated my eyes even though they were closed.
Right.
Like the sun had come into the room. And simultaneously the sound of chimes or a ringing sound of like keys or chimes suddenly became apparent. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I had never been so scared in all my life. Possibly in Vietnam was the only other time. And I opened up my eyes for a split second, and there's a piece of paper floating in the air. And I said, oh, my God. I said, I know I'm not imagining this. This is real. And I jumped out of the bed, ran out of the bed to the next room, turned on the light, and my heart is jumping up and down. And my grandmother comes hobbling in from her bedroom with a cane and says, Andrew, what's wrong? And I said, Grandma, I just had a terrifying dream. She said, turn the light on and sleep with the light on. It's going to be okay. So I go back to the room. On the floor is a piece of paper, and on the paper is handwriting that I asked several of my aunts and uncles, and they said it was my uncle's handwriting. He had been dead for about 6-7 months.
And what was written there?
That's a good question. It was his doodling. He would doodle on paper, like just nothing that you make sense out of.
Okay, but it nevertheless was his handwriting, and you saw that paper in midair.
I swear to Almighty God, I saw it floating in the air, touching the ground. That's when I knew I wasn't dreaming. I knew, and the sound of chimes. And by the way, I had heard one other story.
Okay, well, we've got to keep it to one story per customer, but that was a good one. And I am convinced that if people who pass away really have a strong enough will to do something, they can do it. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I was calling in to tell a ghost story.
Okay, I'm hearing clicking on the line.
I just turned off the radio.
Okay, again, I'm hearing a lot of clicking. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from my house in San Francisco, California.
San Francisco, okay.
I'm taking it upstairs where the receiver is. I was calling to tell him this story about this place I used to live in. It was in San Jose.
Okay, I'm going to have to pass on this one. You're going to have to try and get reconnected. That was a very bad clicking sound. First-time caller line, you're on the air.
Yeah. Hi, Art.
Hi.
I guess I'm a first-time and probably a last-time caller as well.
Really?
Well, I was going to tell you, it was in the mid-'80s. I was quite a youngster. My brother and I were a couple troublemakers. Being from Idaho, you can guess that we're kind of like Hicks and a stick. We thought we'd scare some people with the Ouija board. We had a Halloween party, and along with the bobbing for apples. Have you ever tried to bob for apples?
Oh, sure.
It's pretty tough. But anyway, we decided to get a Ouija board and scare our friends. So I had quite a good memory. I remembered pretty near every number I've ever dialed on a phone back then. Mm-hmm. And so my brother was going to make the noises, the ghost noises, and I was going to recall these numbers to prove that the Ouija board would work.
Okay.
So we had quite a few skeptics in the room, being teenagers and what, and, they asked the question, well, what's the phone number for the theater? Of course, I knew it from memory, dramatically moved the Ouija board around with my friends and came up with the right numbers. And the head skeptic, Jim, had a phone book there. He was verifying the numbers. Uh-huh. And I had to stretch my mind quite a few times, remembering things like the grocery store, et cetera, but I got them all right.
Uh-huh.
And my brother, he would slip off in the other room and would make some different types of noises. And I'm telling you, Art, I really had to choke back the laughter a few times because I'd look at people's faces and they were as white as ghosts, and because they would hear the culmination of hearing the noise he was making and my numbers that I was getting. Well, anyways, we heard a blood-curdling scream, and we jumped up. I jumped up. I couldn't believe my brother made that noise. We rushed in, and here my brother was speechless. And I was very shocked. I couldn't figure out what had happened. And I gave him a wink, and he gave me a wink back, and everything seemed to be okay. He joined us back in the room, took the phone book, and I did another number. Well, this time, Jim, the skeptic, asked me a number that I had no way of knowing, a women's lingerie shop that was local to the town here.
Yeah.
How am I going to remember that?
We're almost out of time, so end it quickly.
So anyways, I just made a number up out of the clear blue. As it turns out, the next day, my brother verified that was the correct number in the book. I thought he was pulling a prank on me and agreeing with it, but as it turns out, that was true. The number was true.
There you've got it, sir. The Ouija board, unfortunately, worked. It's Halloween, actually into the hours just after in some time zones. Good morning, Ghost to Ghost underway. One story per customer. One, folks. Make it your best. And if it doesn't scare you, it probably won't scare us. And if at all possible, please do not use a cell phone. They're just too difficult to understand, and you miss certain little parts. At any rate, in a moment, back to Ghost AM. The following is from Joan in Ferndale, Washington. During the 80s, I worked for a university in the Department of Journalism that had offices in an old Victorian house located off campus. A beautiful old structure with 3 floors and a widow's walk overlooking the bay. It was during the summer, and the faculty was gone, and I was left alone attending to the routine of the office. At first, I noticed a child crying, but upon checking, found no one. However, the desperate sound would continue over the summer, often interrupting my work. My office was located on the 2nd floor in what used to be a bedroom, down a long hall with a Palladian window at the head of the stairs. It became increasingly difficult to mount the stairs, pass the window, and go to my office, because I had to pass through an atmosphere that was chillingly cold and somehow thick. On the 3rd floor was what used to be a servant's quarters, but were now used for storage. I had the keys to all the rooms, was not able to open a door that was located at the end of the 3rd floor hall, though I tried repeatedly. My friend, who was intensely interested in all paranormal things, expressed an interest in investigating the old house. That Saturday was gray and wet, thoroughly depressing, made even more so by the house. We entered, went room to room, my friend feeling nothing until we reached the 3rd floor. Amazingly, she was able to unlock the door that I'd been unable to, and she did it with ease. It swung open to reveal a room papered in a yellow floral hanging in tatters, ragged curtains at the window. Upon the floor, in a thick layer of dust, was a child's tiny footprint. My friend said, we've got to get out of the house now. Taking a piece of the torn paper before I shut and locked the door, we left, fighting our way down the stairs through what appeared to be a whirling, cold vortex. Hand over hand, gripping the banister, we forced our trembling feet step by step until we thankfully reached the lower hall. Backward glance revealed 3 columns of a gray fog interspersed with pinpoints of light. I was shaking so badly I could hardly insert the key and lock the old front door. Later, my friend took a piece of the wallpaper to a psychic who informed her it had come from a nursery. The child, a little boy, had fallen down the stairs and broken his neck. His mother had gone insane with grief, had been locked away in the 3rd floor by her husband, an abusive man. The 3 continued to haunt the property. Even though the house was torn down and the land turned into a parking lot, still, late at night, if you look carefully as you drive by, you can see a gray-blue light spiraling up from the pavement. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, is this the Ghost Line?
It is.
Oh, hi. This is my first time calling.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to tell you a story.
Okay.
I've been listening all night.
What is your first name?
Jeannie.
Jeannie. And where are you?
I'm in Grants Pass, Oregon.
Okay. Fire away.
Okay. Well, when I was 17, I had gotten really, really sick. And I was in bed. My mom had covered me with a lot of blankets. And when I woke up, all the blankets were over my head. And I could feel somebody shaking me. So I flipped the blankets off me, and standing there was a man that I had a glowing orange, one of those electric heaters in the corner of my room.
Oh, yes.
And what I saw was I could see he had blonde hair, he had green eyes, he was wearing a plaid shirt, jeans, and when I got scared was because I saw that he was floating. He was about a foot off the floor.
Oh, my God. Why? I'm curious. If he was shaking you, why would you? The last thing I would have done was throw the covers off me. I'd probably bury myself in them.
Well, that's what I did. I yanked the covers right back over my head. I screamed for my mom.
Yeah.
And nobody came, and I tried to listen for footsteps going out of the door. Even though I could see through him, I could see my orange heater in the background.
Right through him.
I could see right through him, but I could still see him. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Perfectly clearly. So I couldn't hear any footsteps. Nobody left. My mom didn't come in the room, and so I peeked out underneath the covers to make sure nobody was standing there. And I walked out into, down my hallway. When I got to the end of the hallway, I passed the kitchen. Nobody was in the kitchen. Nobody was in the dining room. I get to the living room, and the TV was on, and it was all staticky. It was like just a static channel. Right. And I stood there. Nobody's there. I looked in all the bedrooms because bedrooms were to the right, and nobody was in the house. And the TV switched off, and I took off out of the front door, and I ran next door, and that's where my mom was. So she told me it was just a dream. So 5 years later, I saw the same spirit. He had come to me in a dream and taken me to a room and was telling me that my boyfriend, which was my son's father at the time, was going to hurt me. And I said, no, he's not going to hurt me. He would never hurt me. He said, you need to get out. He's going to hurt you. I said, why should I have to get out? I don't want to leave my things. These are my things. I shouldn't have to leave. He's not going to hurt me. And he goes, you need to get out. And he screamed, get out, really loud. And then all of a sudden I was back in my bed, and he was floating over me. And the next thing I knew is I had landed on my back on the floor right next to where my son's father was sleeping. And it was like I bounced from my bed onto the floor. I didn't roll, just bounced. And the next day we did get in an argument. And right there in the spot where he, I had landed the night before. He choked me until I believe I was dead.
Oh, God.
And he couldn't, he couldn't wake me up. He said I had turned blue. And he was slapping me, and I could hear him slapping me, and I can hear him talking, but I couldn't feel it. And he was crying. His tears were dripping on my face, but I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't remember anything. But it's if I ever see that entity again or that spirit, I will absolutely listen instead of argue.
Yeah, I guess if you get a warning like that, it means something. It's hard to know, isn't it? If somebody comes to you, you can imagine it's in a dream, and I suppose the first instinct is to believe, particularly after it's over for a while. Your mind does that as, kind of a protective measure. Well, it was a dream. But then, of course, when it comes true, next time you listen. On Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. How you doing?
Doing well, sir.
This is Finch from West Yarmouth, Massachusetts.
Welcome.
When I was, this is 1965 story. When I was about 5 years old, my mom had to go work with my dad, who owned a pharmacy, and they were out late, and she called and said they were going to be very late. So my older brothers and sisters were in charge of watching us. And long story short, first thing that went wrong that night is we had a TV downstairs and one upstairs, and there was no cable then or satellite TV.
Mm-hmm.
The TV upstairs started broadcasting like 10 seconds after the one downstairs, which started freaking everybody out.
That is weird, yes.
Yeah, and then by the time we had to go to bed, my older sisters, Susan and Cindy, they had the downstairs bedroom, we had the upstairs bedroom. So all the boys upstairs started screaming because we saw a shadow man on the wall because we had a stereo that was turned down, but the light allowed you to see it.
Right.
And we ran downstairs in her room. She thought we were nuts. Then we were all in her room downstairs. They opened the door, peeked out into the living room, and we all saw it again. And when my parents got home, they didn't believe any of us.
Of course not.
TV or the shadow man looked with the hat that looked like Lincoln.
The story about the TVs is very interesting. Now, in this modern day, you can observe such a difference in transmissions. For example, from a C-band signal, some of you will know what I'm talking about, C-band satellite signal, and then one that comes in on KU band, you can notice a 5 to 8 second delay. But with respect to what he's talking about, that would indicate some sort of time distortion, if you will, that could be real. On the international line, you're on the air. Hello. Hello. Going once, going twice, gone. East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Is this Art?
It is. Turn your radio off, please.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Oh, my gosh. I didn't... I've been trying to get a hold of you for years. I'm a long-time listener.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, you're on the air.
Okay. I got a ghost story, and it's a real true thing. My uncle passed away back in the early 70s, and we went to his funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just about 8 or 9 years old, and I got a twin brother, and the whole family went down there. My dad flies an airplane, so we flew down there to get to his funeral. Before we went down there, my uncle said that he wanted to come up and visit our new house. Well, we just moved to a new house on the lake, and he never got to see it. And he said, well, I'll be up there on that Thursday. My uncle said that, and but he passed away before he got a chance to come up to visit the house.
Right.
So we went down to the funeral and flew back up to Michigan, and on that Thursday that he said he was going to be there, my brother and I, my twin, shared a bedroom, and we had hardwood floors on the floor, and we started hearing somebody walking on the floor, and we're going, I'm shaking, my bed was on one side of the room, and his bed was on the other side of the room, and we heard us walking on the floor. I got scared. I jumped over to my brother's bed, and we're hugged up against the wall, and we left the door open, and all of a sudden we seen this figure come into the room, and my uncle dressed real nice. I mean, top hat. He was a car salesman, and restaurant owner, and he always dressed real nice, and he wore glasses, and he just we're laying, up against the wall, shaking like leaves, and it was just, you just couldn't believe it, the feeling that I had, and we had.
So there was no question about who it was.
Yeah, it was my uncle. He was in our room, and he peeked in the door and looked over at my brother and I, and then he went downstairs, and then all of a sudden a bunch of banging noises started going off downstairs in the kitchen, and my dad came in. He says, "What the heck are you guys doing?" To my brother and I, He says, "What are you guys doing?" We said, "We ain't doing nothing. We just saw Uncle," and he
didn't believe you, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was. Well, my dad went down to investigate because my dad saw something going downstairs. He thought it was my brother and I,
Mm-hmm.
And
I wonder if there's a certain period of time after you die when you do have an opportunity to do something like that man obviously did. He had intended to make that visit, and I wonder if there is a certain period of time after you pass when you can accomplish or finish or send a message or cause a piece of paper to fly in the middle of the room or something so that somebody knows that you're on the other side. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello? Going once, going twice, gone. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Turn your radio off,
I've
please.
got my finger on the radio.
There you go.
Am I on the air?
You are.
Oh, this is Kat from Idaho.
Hi, Kat.
I'm a palm reader, and I was reading up in a little town just coming from Salt Lake City on the way to Yellowstone Park, and had a lady come up, and I said, "Now, in your right hand, have you ever had a visit from a guardian spirit, an angel? It'll show in your hand." And she had a line that came right in when she was 17 years old. And I said, "Here's a visit from a guardian angel at 17. She says, no. She says, my girlfriend saw my dead mother. She says, my mother died when I was 12. And she says, when we were 17, my dead mother appeared to my girlfriend in her bedroom. She said, I wasn't there. She said, I was coming home from a ball game. I was a cheerleader. And she said, I'd stopped at the Shell station to get gas. And she says, I ran into some motorcycle gang there. And I was in kind of a nefarious position with the guys that kind of backed her into the alley. Mm-hmm. And she says, but my mother, dead mother, appeared to my girlfriend in her bedroom. And she says, the spirit spoke to her, and it says, go help Holly, Shell. And so her girlfriend was there, and I looked in her hand, and gosh darn, she had a line right at the same place, age 17. And the lady says, she says, my dad, she appeared to my dad, too. And she says, and the father walked over, and I looked in his hand, and right there at age 39, he had a line going into onto his timeline. And I said, what happened? He said, it was 11 o'clock at night, and I was sitting there reading the newspaper, and he says, I looked up on the wall. There was a big, huge painting of my dead wife, and he says, I swear those lips moved. And he says, they said, go help Holly now. Shell, the lady's name was Holly. She says, go help Holly now. And he says, it was the strangest thing. And he says, his daughter walked in, saw the same thing. He says, let's go. They jumped in the car and took off for town. They lived 3 miles out. The girlfriend jumped in her car, and she took off, too. And they all headed for town looking for Holly. Well, they found Holly, and the motorcycle gang was just about that close to raping that little girl.
Wow.
And they saved her and brought her home. Now, I said to the father, I said, well, what age were you when this Holly was born? He says, well, I was 22 years old. Well, 22 plus 17 is 39.
Mm-hmm.
So the lines all matched up exactly when the dead mother appeared to the girlfriend and to the father, and the dead mother said, go help Holly Shell.
I wonder if
Shell Station.
I wonder if there is a period of time, again, when you can get something done, get a message across, or perhaps help somebody. If they're in some sort of desperate straits, as that girl obviously was, if that can really be done. If it's significant enough, if it's a matter of life and death, maybe you can cross. First-time caller line, you're on the air.
Hey, I was going to tell you a story about when I was young and foolish reading ghost stories. My husband worked late, and I was reading this classic story about by one, by two, by three, about a man who had a group of friends who got together for a big meal every year, and always one was missing, and got down to two left. And the subject came up, what happened to our friends? Well, we really don't know. And so the guy asked him to go down to the cellar to get a bottle of wine. And at that time, when we lived in a little 20-foot trailer, and it was about 12 o'clock at night, it was really late. And
I'll tell you what. We're coming up on a break. Hold it right there. When we get back, we'll continue with that story, okay? Can you hold on?
I sure can.
Okay, good. Stay right there. We'll be right back. Do you feel that hand? Ghost to Ghost AM on this All Hallows Eve. I'm Art Bell, and we'll be right back. Well, all right, as promised, back to the first-time caller line. Catch us up and go right ahead.
That me?
That's you.
Okie doke. I was reading this book, and we lived in this little tent trailer, and it was out in an orchard where scary things happen sometimes. And I was reading about this man whose friends visited him once a year, and they had all mysteriously begun to disappear. And they were talking about, wonder what happened to old so-and-so. And so came time for wine, and the guy said, why don't you go down to the cellar and pick out a really good bottle of wine? So this guy goes down in the cellar, and it's a winding staircase. It's dark, it's gloomy, and he hears these two pairs of hoofs. And he looks up as he's going down, and he sees the devil himself with the red glowing eyes. And, of course, he knew what happened to his friends, and he slammed this great door between them. And as I was imagining the exchange of the screaming and the yelling going between them, about that time something fell on the top of this little tin roof of the trailer we lived in, and it was a big thump, and then a screaming, and a scratch went all the way down the outside of the trailer. Two cats were fighting, fell out of the tree, and were trying to hang on to the tin, scritched all the way down. While I was laying there, I couldn't breathe. I was so frightened. I'd been so caught up into the story. My husband came home. I don't know how long I'd been there. I was catatonic. I was drooling with my eyes open, and he said, what in the world happened to you? And I said, read this story. He read it. He said to me, first thing you do in the morning, get up and burn this book. Don't you ever read that kind of stuff again.
And I take it you burned the book.
I burned the book.
All right, thank you very much. And good morning, Must of the Rockies. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Elliot out of Arizona.
Yes, Elliot.
When I was like 9, 10 years old, my mother and my grandmother and we all went on a picnic and out in the country to this lake. And as it was getting dark, we decided to leave. And my grandmother took the wrong turn, and
she didn't realize it, and we were traveling down this dirt road for a long ways, and she realized that she went the wrong way, and we pulled up to this driveway, and by this time it was night, and there was a glowing pillar that we noticed off the side of the road. It was like bluish-white pillar, and we started driving up closer to it, and I remember my mother started screaming, back the car up, and she started beating her hands on the dashboard, and we could see it was an apparition of a woman, and it was drifting towards the car. And yeah, and so we get the heck out of there.
But you also saw it.
Yeah.
And it was indeed an apparition of a woman.
Yes. All three of us seen it.
All right. And so you beat feet and got out of there.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. As I would do. You see, the lines are just chock full. Hundreds, thousands of people trying to call with ghost stories. Now, what do you make of that? So many people have seen so much. There's got to be something to it. East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Yeah, Art.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hey, I we must have hung up on the phone or something happened. I called earlier about my uncle passing away and all that.
Okay.
Well,
did we not get the end of the story or what?
Yeah, I want to tell you the end of the story. Well, the beginning of the story was that my brother and I were my uncle passed away, and we had to fly down to Indiana, and my uncle showed up in our bedroom. We heard him walking on the floor.
Yeah, I recall.
Okay. Well, anyway, to finish up the story, as my dad went downstairs, and because he heard some ruckus going down there in the kitchen.
Right.
And the pots and pans were laying all over the floor, and my dad had seen something go down the stairway, and then the pots and pans were all over the floor, and then later my dad told me that told us he saw Uncle, and then my dad just passed away here a few years ago, and in my dream, and this is real weird. My dream, and I got two other brothers. We all had the same dream, and that night, then my dad passed away, and we dreamed that Dad was up in heaven, and there was a big crowd below him, thousands and thousands of people, and my uncle was up there to greet him, and my dad just looked so great, and he just had the biggest smile on his face, and he just twitched his eyes and nodded his head like...
Okay, well, listen, we've got to hold it right there. I appreciate the recall, and I do recall that story, and so I guess the dream was sort of the end of that. Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. This is Robert calling from Little Rock. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Robert.
About 10 years ago, I was in my apartment, and I was reading a book. It was The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. And it was around midnight on a Saturday night, and I had like a collection of comic book action figures just kind of lined up on a shelf, like Superman and Batman and so on. And one of them was Morbius, the living vampire, which is a good guy in the Marvel Comics storylines. But he's a pretty sinister-looking character. And they were way up on a shelf above a set of dresser drawers. And so I'm reading the book, and it's midnight, and the room doesn't shake, a truck doesn't drive by, there wasn't like a gust of wind or anything, but the Morbius figure, and only that figure, plopped off the shelf and landed into an open drawer of underwear.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it's funny, it's kind of weird, but, I don't know if maybe somebody was, like if, if the spirits were trying to say anything about me, or trying to be funny. But at the time at 12 in the morning, especially when you're reading The Exorcist, it's a little creepy.
Maybe Morbius just had a big fetish.
Yeah, I guess.
Thanks. Anything more to it?
No, that was it.
That was it.
Kind of weird.
Okay. Thank you very much for the call. And Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hey, Art.
Hello. Turn your radio off, please.
Sorry about that. This is Andrew in Las Vegas.
Yes, sir.
I just I got this great story I got to tell you. We used to live in this old house. It's about 50 years old here in Las Vegas. And one night, my dad's like, so there's this guy, Art Bell. He's doing this show called Coast to Coast, and you're doing Ghost to Ghost tonight. So it's the first time I've ever listened to your show. And so it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I got up to turn off the radio. I had a remote. So I clicked it. The radio turned off. And then it turned right back on again. Then I clicked it again. Turned off, turned right back on. This went on for a couple minutes. I went to the radio, pulled it out of the wall, and the other room, the radio turned on and dialed into Ghost to Ghost.
That is the power of this program, sir.
Yeah, so I was waiting to tell you that.
That's a true story?
True story. And then the next morning I went in and I had that radio set to FM, and you guys are on AM, and it was changed to AM, so it really happened. So, and it was off, too.
That's the power. I appreciate the call, sir. Thank you. Yes, indeed, the power. Wildcard Line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Morning, Art. How are you?
I'm fine. Turn your radio off, please.
Yeah, it's off.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Alex from Connecticut. And
Hi.
This story isn't actually about me, but I worked as an EMT, and I had a partner who grandmother lived in Waterbury, Connecticut, and there was one room in her house where everybody in his family, if they ever slept in there, had horrible nightmares, could never sleep, always had a problem. And his whole entire family kept saying they saw some guy walking around his grandmother's house. He'd never seen it. Whenever he stayed over her house and stayed in that room, he got the best night's sleep of anywhere he ever slept. Slept like a rock. Well, one day he's at his house a few towns away, and he's sleeping, and in his dream, he wakes up and he sees this man, like turn of the century clothing, like a long waistcoat, top hat, and he's in his grandmother's house and sees this guy walking up the stairs to upstairs to his grandmother's bedrooms. She gets him up and follows this guy, and as soon as he gets to the top of the stairs, he hears this blood-curdling scream, and it's just bright white light, and he wakes up instantaneously. Well, the next day he's talking to his family, and none of his family had ever told him what this guy looked like before, but for some reason his family starts talking about what this ghost in his grandmother's house looks like, and it turns out it looks exactly like this guy that he saw in his dream. Top of that, his grandmother had her bedroom remodeled in this room that everybody always had problems in. She had to stay in that room while her bedroom was being remodeled. She stayed there for a couple months while her bedroom was being remodeled, and she kept getting all these ailments while she was in that room, including at one point in time she got that flesh-eating bacteria.
Oh, my God.
And was being treated and started to get better, and then she'd go sleeping in the room again, and it'd get worse again. As soon as she moved back into her bedroom, after it was remodeled, she never had any more problems.
Boy, that's fascinating. I wonder if there really can be places that are bad, just literally bad places, where not only do you not get a good night's sleep, but you get sick. Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Oh, Art. Hey,
Hello.
what a privilege.
Yes, sir.
This is Jared. I'm right now. I'm just east of Dallas, or Houston, actually. And I thought I know you hate the cell phones, but this one's about a cat, and I knew you'd enjoy this one. I lived in a 31-foot Bose Arrow trailer, and I had a cat. Lived by myself in Bellingham, Washington, and I'd come home after work. And after locking my door, and the door would be open, and the cat would be out. And this went on for days, and I'd go on for a weekend. I'd come home, and I'll be darned if that door would be open. Nothing would be missing or stolen, but the cat would be out.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, well, maybe that crazy cat is opening the door from the inside by getting up on the couch. So I fixed it so it absolutely could not do that. Well, I came home one night, after work, and the door was closed. So I was thrilled about that, because nothing like coming home and finding your darn house open for the world to get into. And but the cat was gone, and I was thinking, well, where in the world did that cat go? Well, those old travel trailers, they have a rear bathroom, and so you go to the bathroom, and there's twin beds on either side. I don't know if you know that kind of trailer, but there's these big drawers that pull out for your clothes and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so I'm looking for the cat, and I how you call a cat, kitty, kitty, kitty. And I hear this real faint meow sound, and I'm thinking, well, where in the world? And it sounds like it's coming down from underneath the trailer. So I go outside and get on my hands and knees, look into the trailer. Well, there's no cat there. And I go inside, and I look into the couch, and I hear this faint meow noise. And so anyway, so I'm crawling on my hands and knees, if you can imagine, going from one end of that trailer to the other on the inside. And I finally get to where the twin beds are, and I hear this faint meow sound. Well, I pull this drawer. Now, there's some cavities underneath these beds. One side has a big water tank, and the other side has this hollow cavity where the fender well is. There is absolutely no way anything can get back in there. But here I pull this big drawer out with all my clothes and everything. That's the only access point to that cavity back there, and that cat was back there. And it shot out of there like a shot, and it ran out the door, and it was gone for 2 days. But there was no way that cat could have got back in there. You have to physically pull this big, giant drawer full of clothes out in order for to get access back to that cavity back there, and that cat was back there.
Well, maybe that cat had powers that we can only wonder about. Cats are very strange, mystical creatures. It was once said, I believe, that the Egyptians worshipped cats, and cats have never forgotten that. Wildcard line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. Thanks for having me on the program.
Sure.
My problem is that I'm possessed by 3 ghosts.
You are possessed by 3 ghosts?
Yes, I know who they are. They're famous people.
And how do you know that?
Because they told me. I called them, really. I made a mistake.
In other words, you called these 3 famous ghosts to you?
Yes.
Big mistake.
Yes. They're evil witches.
Really?
Yes.
And so what are you going to do?
Well, I know how to kill them.
Or exorcise them?
Well, I want to kill their ghosts. That's what I want to do.
How do you kill a ghost?
Well, their names are Carlos Castaneda, Carol Tiggs, and Nuri Alexander. If everyone joins together in trying to bash them, we could win, kill these predators.
Gee whiz, why do you think well, you already told me, you called them. Why, out of curiosity, why did you do that?
Well, he's famous for his books, and he promised to help everybody who tried to approach him and go into the other world, but turns out they were predators. They were tricking everybody.
Mm-hmm. You might want to see an exorcist, actually. First-time caller line, you're on the air.
Hey, Art, I'm in. All right, great. How are you doing tonight?
I'm just fine, sir. Don't have a lot of time here, so lay it on us.
Here we go. This is it. Okay. Well, okay, I'm escorting this girlfriend of mine. She's a friend, and her boyfriend just died. And so we get there. I knew the guy, but not very well. So I leave her alone for a moment with, there at the graveside with the boyfriend. And I'm walking, and I come across this dug-up grave that someone's going to be laid down to rest tomorrow, the next day. So crazy as it was, I was in my early 20s. I go, wow, how would it feel to just lay down in something like this? So I jump in, I jump in this thing, right? And, oh boy. And so, that night, I'm in bed, and this lady appears, right? And she goes, I really don't appreciate you laying where I'm going to be laid to rest, In other words,
Yes.
Boy, oh boy, it scared the living daylights out of me. It was something else. It was, boy, you know, I guess I'm getting some payback because the thing is, after she was visiting her boyfriend, this was as it was getting dark too. You know, it was just starting to get dark when we went. Anyway, she starts to look for me, right? and I hear her calling me, and I go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You know, and so I come up out of this hole, you know, the hole there, and boy, she was scared to death. She saw me coming out of that hole, and it was something else. Boy, she turned really white. I felt so bad. She was so mad at me after that.
Yeah, don't. Moral of that story is do not lie in others' graves. Listen, everybody, that's going to do it for Ghost to Ghost 07. Some pretty good ones along the way. It has been my pleasure, and who knows, perhaps 08 will do this again. From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I'm Art Bell. Have a great night.